last year to show her feature film Human Wild, which is still a work in progress, I understand. And I've never met Anneè until today, so I'm very pleased that we are here together. So as I mentioned quickly, I'm going to start out by showing you a couple of images from the exhibition in Washington, D.C., where, as I said, it was really a larger exhibition. And the big difference is that it juxtaposed historical works from the 19th century and early 20th century with contemporary works in very interesting conversation. It was not installed chronologically. I really tried to come up with interesting conversations between the different works. So some of the same works that are here and then combined with other works. I was really happy to be able to do this wonderful juxtaposition between Tori Ranes, whose work is here, the projection, and put that next to one of the most important paintings in Finland, painting by Akseli Gallen-Kallela from, I think, around 1890, which is considered a Finnish national treasure, and that painting actually has only left Finland once before when it was shown in Paris at the Orsay d'Orsay. So I was a little nervous because I had heard that the director of the museum, where the painting comes from, was coming for the installation. So I wasn't sure whether I should turn the projector on or not. But I did, and he loved it, actually. He thought it was really wonderful. So that's something I had actually never done before. I've been doing exhibitions for almost 30 years. And mostly contemporary art, and then expanding into kind of post-war, 20th century to contemporary. So this was the first exhibition that I've done, including 19th century work, and it was great for me to do that. It's one of the wonderful things you can do when you work at the Phillips collection, because we don't have departments for 19th century art and 20th century art. All the curators work together. And so it was really thrilling for me to do that, and I've become increasingly interested in juxtaposing work by older artists with work by contemporary artists. Here's a few other views. I'll put the names of the artists underneath so you can get a better sense. There were a couple of kind of threads that went through the exhibition. That, like this room with the Gallen-Kallela and the sonnet painting here was more about, and the Tori Ranes, kind of about mythology and folklore, which is a very strong element that continues to inspire artists even today. And one of the other things I mentioned to some of you earlier is that one of the things that I really discovered that had a great impact on me, that I learned, was that the great support of women artists that seem to be in the Nordic countries, especially already in the 19th century. And so as a result, about half of the artists are female and the other half is male artists. There was an exhibition just prior to the show at the Phillips in the summer of last year called Women in Paris. That was at the Clark Art Institute. It was a wonderful show, and it was all about women artists, 19th century women artists going to Paris and studying art there. And more than half of the women were from the Nordic countries. So there was a lot of artists in the Nordic countries. They would go there. Sometimes the art schools in their country wasn't open to women, although there were other schools and other places where they could go. But so they all went to, many of them went to Paris, and some went to London, some went to Dresden and Berlin. And then they came back and often started their own art schools for women. So it was a very interesting thing that I knew nothing about. And it just was very striking for me to walk into museums in Oslo or in Stockholm or Copenhagen and see so many women artists on the walls in the 19th century sections, which you don't find here. Or even in other places in Europe that easily. So that was very interesting. And I want to talk more about that with you guys. Neal Stradella, was one of the great discoveries that I made in Sweden. This amazing artist who I knew very little about, and I saw one of his a big retrospective in Malmö when I was there, and I was very pleased to be able to get this amazing painting called The Dying Dandy, which is both a self-portrait and a premonition of his own death, because he had a lifelong heart condition and actually died of a heart attack much later, actually in this town in New York. But it was wonderful to have that work there, and here's a few other things, some historical work. There's the little painting by Eggert Pedersen that's in the show here, which was next to a wonderful August Strindberg painting, another artist that, of course, is better known as a playwright, but it's made some amazing art. And then here's a room with more contemporary things. There's the video by Anneè, together with the Paul Gernes piece that's installed downstairs. You may notice or not that the piece is installed a little differently. It's a modular piece, so you can install it any which way you want, as long as you comply with certain rules. That the beige stripe is always the bottom of the panel, and but the order is completely, you can do any order you want. I had 3 pieces by Katrin Sigurðardóttir in the exhibition that we do not have here. Instead, we borrowed 2 works on paper. These pieces were not available for this venue, but the artist was very generous, and she gave us 2 beautiful study drawings that we included instead. And you can see just in the back room a wonderful Willem Hammershøi painting, behind Anne's work. Another view, there you can see the Per Kirkeby and the Eliasson photographs. And the wonderful Shoplifter piece. So this piece was literally designed by Shoplifter to fit into our staircase. It was an idea that I had, and I wasn't sure we could do it, and my staff wasn't sure it could be done. So I asked her if she could come down she lives in Brooklyn, to Washington, and we all met and we figured it out, and it worked, and it was really wonderful. And so this is the bottom. It went all the way through all 3 floors. So the exhibition was on the 3rd floor. So it was wonderful for people to walk up through this exhibition. So for this exhibition, she changed the piece. She added a few more pieces and created it more site-specifically for this space right here. She's a really wonderful artist to work with. Very colorful, just like her work. And there's just a shot of Marthe's video. Put that in because you're here today. So we also had a video room where we did 7 videos on an hourly schedule. We would show these different videos. I also decided to include a couple of pictures of another exhibition that I co-curated of works by Tony Podesta, who's a prominent collector in Washington, D.C., very generous and very strong promoter of women artists and artists in general, who very generously donates works for museums in Washington and in New York and other places. And this is an exhibition that's currently at the Katzen Center, which is part of American University in D.C. And all the works are works that are now in the collection of the Katzen Center. They were either given directly by Tony to the Katzen Center, or were came to them recently through the Corcoran Gallery of Art. When Corcoran closed, all the works were distributed and to other museums. We received some works also. And I'm showing this because Anneè is prominently included in there, but also several other Nordic artists. Tony is a very big supporter of Nordic art for a long time. He's very close with Eliasson and many other artists. So here's a view that shows your work together with another artist, Mallory Marder, who's from California. And there's a view, you can see, you can't really see it now, in the very back, you can see your works again. And in the foreground, you have this artist, Jone Kvi, if I pronounce it correctly, probably not. Who's Norwegian. It's one of his mushroom sculptures. And then you have Ann-Sofie Siden, a Swedish artist with a sculpture, self-portrait. So just thought that would be nice to see before we start. talking about. So then we can talk about you guys. So, but I wanted to start up quickly. How do you feel? Did I get this right about the support of women artists in the Nordic countries? Do you feel that there is a strong support of women artists in the Nordic countries?
Yes, I do. It's not 50% yet, I think, but it's yes, it is. It's a tradition.
Yeah.
And also because as I can just tell from today, and I've been working as a professor both in Norway and in Sweden. It's a lot of. It's mainly, it's a lot of women who apply to more than men who apply to the art academies, and there is mostly more women studying also in the art schools.
But do the students, the female students, for instance, are they aware of the history of all these women artists from the 9th century and early 20th century?
No, I don't think so. No, unfortunately. But I think that could be a part also of maybe the education also, that you don't really. Maybe it's more so now that you're more aware of it. But I don't think it's something that they were when I was teaching, mostly maybe 5-10 years ago. But it's interesting to see, because there is a lot of women, and there's a lot of support for it also in Sweden. What I can talk about.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure also, thinking about, you mentioned in the past that there was a strong support of the women, but there was also a backlash to it, how they were, in a way, if there was the husband was a more well-known artist, it was more or less the male artist who got more attention. And,
yes, like it's a famous story, like when Munch was studying in Oslo, they had drawings, they drew nudes, but the women were banned from that, so they were in the cellar drawing a cow, because he could stand still for hours, So it was, but probably because they had to travel to get their education, and they got much more influences also, so it was more helpful for them.
Interesting. I'm curious about, as I mentioned the show that was at the Clark Art Institute, that how many women artists in the 9th century from the Nordic countries, but also even from this country, United States, but and England and Germany, went to Paris, and I think, wonder how much, in a way, they might have, and many of them went to Paris because they didn't really have easy access to the same education as the men. True. So whether they might actually get in a way, a better or more
international influence.
International education than the men.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking of the show at Guggenheim. I always remember, the name falls out of my head, but what's her name again?
Hilma af
Klint.
Yeah.
And of course, she didn't want her works to be, this kind of works that shows there, to be shown until, was it like 20 years after her death? Because she thought that the world wasn't ready for it. And I think she was right, because I think that there could be some, is she crazy? That could be the thing as a woman then, to come out with that kind of painting, hysterical, that it's something was wrong with her to make that kind of things. And that's, in a way, would be sad, because if a male artist at the time would do these paintings, it wouldn't be a problem, I think. It's the same as if she was a woman who could do this. So she knew that, I guess, herself, that it couldn't be shown until 20 years later.
True. All right, let's see. So here we have that video that I mentioned to you. A lot of people, when they watch that video in the exhibition, they would always have this, feel very sorry for you. This painful expression on their face, like, this woman is suffering so much, and it looks like you are.
Yes, I did a lot. Since it was minus Celsius 15 degrees, it was pretty cold.
Was that your first video you made?
God, no. I did a video in 1996, I think, which was my first video, where I learned ventriloquism as my master piece. So I actually made a dummy and talked to myself in a very strange way. And I actually did learn ventriloquism. It took a year.
Really?
Yeah. The people ask me even now if I can do that, and you can't, because it slips out. It's like learning to play the guitar. It's like an own language. So.
Interesting. Yeah.
But it's an old piece, so it's kind of strange to look at. It's interesting to look at older works now, and when you look back at things you did how times is changing, young artists. It's kind of funny to show also older works and not always the latest work you did. Or
yeah. Well, I'm glad you didn't. You allowed me to show this work. I know artists always want to show the most recent works. Yeah, the exhibition. So, if you want to talk a little bit about some of these images, I think you. Yeah,
this is a video actually. Called A Demon's Desire. It was made in 2011 and it's based on a German rock group called Scorpions, a cover of one of their albums from 1976 who was very controversial at the time. And when it came out, it immediately was drawn back. So there was only hundreds of albums coming out. And I was so interested in the story behind these albums, I started to make research about it. And it wasn't easy to figure out how to get, because I wanted to get hold of the original photographer of the photograph on the cover of the album. And so I did, finally. And he's a German guy living in Hamburg. And so I went to see him and to look at this original photograph that he took. And then he told me a little bit of story behind the scenes. And so I wanted to make a video about the actual making of the photograph of the piece, but in the way how I thought it would have been, also in the conversation of what he talked about and what really happened in a way. So it's like a video. There is a lot of only women in the room, and all the women are more or less could be anyone, like the mother of the girl, or because there is this girl who is 12 years at the time sitting naked on this cover in a very kind of weird sexual, looking in the camera. And I was really always wondering what happened. And so there is this group of women surround her, and the camera just goes around. And then I used him again as the photographer. He's an actor in this video of making my work, but as the photographer at the time. And even his wife is in this video. And they were, at the time I made it, like 65 years old, both of them. So she was also part of the shot in 1976 as a makeup, to do all the makeup. So, but it's still, I mean, if you look at the internet about this cover, it actually bursted the whole internet a couple of years ago because it's so overwhelming with all constant, like, people have this opinion about this cover. And the girl who is in the cover is never been, no one knows, because they actually kept her name secret for all these years. I tried to figure it out, but it doesn't work. So, but I found it an interesting story, because how the eyes and the gaze change over years from 1976 till today, how we look at things. I mean, I, for example, couldn't get a young child to appear in my video. It wasn't possible at all. So the girl here is 18 at the time. And at that time, I mean, it was possible. So, but then I showed the actual original photograph from this Michael Gimbut is his name, at my show I did in Stockholm, and people was really afraid that it's going to be a disaster because people are going to be super angry. But they didn't. Nothing happened, because again, it was all about the cover. It says Virgin Killer. There was a crack in a glass over this part of her. It was like this, the male group, Scorpions. That was really the why people are more angry, not the actual photograph. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see how the gaze and what do we look at? What do we, so.
Let's see.
Yeah, this is a photograph called Heartbreak, and I work with, I've done a lot of photographs with a woman living here in New York who is, it's Anita's mother, who sits here. And it's also your daughter in the same picture when she's much younger than today, because this is many years ago. How roles are changing, also in the way of the younger take care of the older, and how it used to be and what's going to happen to us. So I'm kind of interested in the idea of aging, what age really is. I mean, for example, I talked to a lot of women artists, a friend of mine today, about being an artist who's getting older as a woman. I mean, I'm 53 now, and what is our role today? I mean, if you're we always talk about young artists. We want to find young, new artists to discover. And in the literary world, for example, the older you get, the more pat on your back you get as a woman artist. I mean, but then I think there is a change going on also now, that we try to we look at older artists, women artists in.
There's a big change.
Yes, there's a huge change.
I mean, we have an exhibition.
We rediscover a lot of older artists.
We have an exhibition right now at the Phillips Collection by a Cuban-born artist who lives in Puerto Rico. She's 93 years old, Celia Sanchez, and this is her first major retrospective, museum retrospective. And she's still working, she's still active. And there's, of course, many other artists that are getting, especially women artists, older women artists, that are getting a lot of attention, which I think is really wonderful. And that's fairly new, maybe the last 10 years or less. And I don't know if there's any connection, but I don't remember when it was, there was this I thought it was quite controversial exhibition at the new museum. I think it was called Younger Than Jesus.
Yes.
and there was a lot of people were very upset about this. So everyone had to be younger than what it was, 33 or so.
32 when he died.
32 when he died. Yeah. And I think it created a backlash, and that was kind of the height of this kind of focus on the youngest, newest, whatever. And then suddenly you started seeing older artists, both male and female, having exhibitions. One of the great older artists today, working today, Sam Gilliam, who also is in Washington D.C., is getting an enormous attention now as like never before. He's in his late 80s, I think, and many other artists are doing this now, and I think it's a wonderful thing.
And also it makes us think like we are like a young and hot artist again.
Yeah.
I love that.
Right.
Since I'm only 53 versus
totally.
like I have another 40 years.
You're too young. You have to wait.
I'm too young, yeah. That's the feeling you get. Like.
And also now in Hollywood too. I was just reading about this new film with Julianne Moore I was making. So when, a lot of these beautiful women actresses that were in these kind of leading roles, and now they're getting into their 50s and 60s, and now finally, for a long time it was kind of impossible for them to get decent roles, and then now it's changing. Also,
and I mean, Charlotte Rampling hasn't been better.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Isabelle Huppert.
Yeah. I think it's
so there's a lot
our
of change,
time now.
Which
it's a lot of change, and it's good.
There's a lot of change, and it's definitely good. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, this is also Anita's mother, Elfie, and this is a paraphrase of Gerd Richter's painting Betty of his daughter from 1988. It is. So it's actually I just saw that jacket in a shop in H&M, I think in Stockholm, many years ago, and I thought about Gerd Richter. It just came to my head for some strange reason, and then I thought, that painting he did about his daughter that's turned away, and of course, I mean, she also grows older, and who is Betty really then? So it's...
Is that why there's a question mark in the title?
Yeah.
I double-checked that when I was working on the public
there is
presentation.
A question
I
mark.
wasn't sure whether that was supposed to be there or not, so
I
went back to your website to check if that's actually part of the title.
So it could be Betty in later on. So it's actually it's only one work. So it's not an edition in photograph. It's unique.
Oh, unique.
Yes, since his painting is, and also it has exactly the same size as Gerd Richter's painting.
And it's not part of a series.
No.
Like many of your other works.
Yeah, no, it's just that. And also since it just has exactly the same, like I said, size, and it's just one piece. So it's.
Where is it?
I know it now. Tony Podesta bought it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good to know.
So. No, I asked actually because it went on auction, and then I asked who was, and they couldn't tell. But then in a way, I had a feeling in it, like he would like that work.
Maybe it'll end up at the Home Museum. I'm going to ask him about it. No, he gave a wonderful piece, which I will show you in a few minutes, to us.
This is from 2014. It's actually a work where I.
Is that a video? Or?
No, it's a photograph. Quite a big photograph. It's actually me floating in water. So I have my face above the water. So the only thing you see is the rest of the body. So I'm breathing, and so it's a little bit, it's called mourning, like, you know, when you grieve, and because this was made just after my father just suddenly passed in 2013. So it's really about the feeling of what your choices are, like to go on, keep on living and have a good life, or sink to the bottom. It's like this line of choice you have. And what is interesting, it's sometimes when you work with photography, especially if you don't like use Photoshop in that sense, you take a photograph and you have no idea in a way what comes out. We never thought this was going to be possible to take a photograph like that underwater, because you float away back and forward, and it's just like a lot of things happening. And then when we look at the negatives, you got that like a fish skeleton thing. It's really like if you peel a fish, the skeleton comes out. That just happens because of the white dress reflection in the water. So in a way,
it's like those white shrimp that they have in the deep sea, they're almost transparent.
Yes.
Right?
So in a way, it really deals with the idea of, like, you know, in a way, where mourning are. I mean, where you have to continue, or two sides of it. Oh yeah, and these are sculptures. They are actually 3D printed sculptures. So the whole story again is this is also work from 2014. Where when my father passed away, suddenly you kind of had to go to his home, and he wasn't there anymore, and you feel like a burglar. You go into his house, and suddenly he's not there, but I have possession of all his stuff and furnitures and things, and you like, you don't know what to do, and it feels really kind of bad. And then I found these small I mean, what to keep and what to throw away and what to give away.
Figures?
Yes, from Royal Copenhagen, or it's like being Grøndal, it's called. It's from Danish. Like they're blue and white always, very small. And so I kept them because they've been in my family, my grandmother's home, and there's something so melancholic about them. It's almost like they bought them as a feeling. They put them on a little, vad heter duk? Yeah, tablecloth, and then they put this one on somewhere, and then you looked at it, and they were very kind of introvert, these figures, and I thought, yeah, I have to keep them, and then after a while I decided to make them they're very big now, they're like this big, and they're like they're just 3D printed, and they're painted black, and they are called the solitaires, and with a very long number after, so it's 3 numbers. One is my father's birth certificate numbers, when the day he died, and so it's a long just row. You don't get it until you start really figuring out the digits, and it's his mother's and his mother's in turn. So you know, the solitary, the idea of how, you know, alone we are. We kind of born alone and we die alone, and so they have this, like, normally when you do 3D you polish it very much, and I decided not to. So they are like this. How 3D works is how they just print one. It's like a A4. Bam. So in the end, you have this like almost like circles of like an old tree marks, and so I kept that. So it's in a way you see how it goes down, and I think this makes it kind of nice and. And
they're printed black, or did you have to?
No, they're printed. They're white, as you saw in the beginning.
Yeah,
they're always white, and then because it's made of SLS, it's like a material that you 3D print with, and then they are kind of lacquered black, so they can even be outdoor. That's how it's smooth. So they are like now 3. So it is a continuous work. I have a couple of more of these figurines in different shapes and how they're constructed. So I also now try to work on a separation of something, because you can actually 3D wise you can separate things and put them together and do whatever you want from something that has original out here. So I find it interesting. Yeah, when my father also died, I started to think about interruption. I mean, how a life can very easily get interrupted, you know, from one day to the next. And then I started to think about my own practice as an artist. And sometimes you get like, I think most artists have that period where you kind of, what am I doing? I'm like, fuck, where am I going? What did I do before, and what's next? And also photography became like something. When I started to work with it, it was more of like a coming up medium. People got interested in it, and then suddenly you have all these cell phones, and everybody is a photographer, and everybody can take shots. And And then I thought, you know, why make new works right now? I take my old works and remake them and rework with them and recycle them and what. So this is actually a series of works that I did between 2000 and 2002. Some of the works are from, which deals with relationships with my father. Yeah, that's the original works. And then, so actually that's the one with my father when I take his shirt off. That's part of the MoMA collection, which is funny because then in a way I took it back because it's also a unique work. So now I made another one, but that's a new work, so it doesn't interfere with that one. But then what I did is, this is as analog as you can get. If you go back to the, as analog as you can get, because this work doesn't exist until you print it out. So there is no negative at all. That just doesn't. You can't photograph the work until it's up on a wall, because it's interrupted in the printing machine. So it's kind of stonk, and you stop the big machine, and it kind of sounds like woof, and then it and then when it comes out, it kind of where it stops, it starts to bleed in red. Just by itself. Sometimes, so it gets a little bit this. And then it prints out the rest of the picture. So it's called, God, what is it called? Black Current, the Interrupted series.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of, I thought that was interesting to work in that way, and where the black also in the images is very unknown. What is it? You know, it's like.
And you're doing this with more images?
Yeah, I had done this with 5, but, and there is it's the same a little bit with the sculptures. It's a work in progress. Like so. Yeah, you see there how when it's printed out is really kind of just.
Right.
I mean, today as you're working in photography, you almost have to Sandy Skoglund, I think she's an American artist, right?
Yes.
Yeah. She worked very hard with her images when she started in the 90s. You make these huge installations where, for example, everything is covered with popcorn or everything. I mean, the people and the ground and everything. And then she had a show in Stockholm a couple of years ago, and then her husband said, "Yeah, no, God, we have to." No, the husband had said earlier that you have to film one of your photographs because it takes a year to make these things. And she was like, okay, and they did that, and not more about that. But she was so happy now that they have that video, because today with this Photoshop craziness, many young people went in to see this show and just like, well, I could have done that, you know, in the computer. So it was good that the video was a part of it, because then you could actually see that, oh, this is a huge physical works. So, I mean, with my works also, you have to really sometimes tell, I don't Photoshop, it's just, this is what you see is what you get, it's just plain photography.
Yeah, and that's very interesting, that it's a mechanical work, even though, you know,
and if you do it again, so again, these works, because these works also become unique then, because the next work, if I want to make another one, it looks different.
Make it exactly the same. Yeah. So then I added this one, so this is Unfamiliar series. This is the one that we have at the Phillips collection.
Oh,
yeah, that's
funny.
The one that Tony
great.
gave us. And is that your father's hand? Yeah.
Yes.
So I have to say, and I want to go back to what you said in the beginning about how things change over time. So when we presented that work, you know, every donation, every gift, every acquisition has to go through our arts committee, our board, and be approved. And everyone, no one doubted the artistic value of this work, but a lot of people, especially women in the room, were very uneasy with that picture.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it was just a year ago or so, because of the Me Too movement and everything that was going on. So now, I think 5 years ago, if you look at this picture, people would have a very different response to how they have now.
Oh yes, that's true.
People really felt it very disturbing.
Good.
So
it should be.
But I think you should talk a little bit more about this. So, how was your relationship to your father?
That was great, but of course complicated in a way that we were so different. I mean, I had a very close relationship to my mother. More, I mean, we were very close. But with my father, it was more. He was very vain. He liked to really kind of. So if I make a video with him that he was not in the actual video, most as a shadow, he was a little bit like, you know. Shit, I really want to be part of it. But he always wanted to. I mean, he never really. We were very alike, of course, because you are 50% your parents in a way. But he was also always very supportive about the works. I mean, it's fantastic that he always, even my mother, they did everything. I mean, there is a lot of works in video, especially that. I mean, it's just insane how most parents would say no. And I had to always figure out how to kind of, you know, to make them a part of this. So I couldn't tell. I could tell maybe the day before that we're going to make the video tomorrow. So then there was no like, okay, they didn't have a chance to think about it too much, because then it would be. But I think that it's fantastic that they did all this. So of course of that, we also have another relationship that maybe most kind of kids have with their families or parents, since we also work together in a way. So we did all these things together. And then I made a video that it's...
kind of collaborations.
Yes. And I mean, there was a video where I sit in the car with my father. I hitchhike and he picks me up, and we have these masks on our head. I have this kind of really crazy woman mask. I look like a prostitute, and he has this mask of like, it was supposed to be a famous American actor, but doesn't really look like that because it's like cheap made. And then we just drive around and we ask each other things that we never asked each other before, because again, I just told him like the day before, just think about things you want to ask me that you never dare to ask me. So we drive around for like 20 minutes in our old neighborhoods, and just like he said something to me and I answer, and then I know he's lying and I try to like not, you know, so it's, but we did it. So, and then he just turned me off again at the same place he took me on in the car. So it's like a mental kind of prostitution in a way. We kind of just discuss things in the car. But it's weird, but thanks to them I could do these things. So.
Sounds a little bit like some kind of a therapy session.
No, yeah, of course, but it's the same with, I guess, the video upstairs when the mother spits in his, on him. It's kind of this
video.
I'm interested in this relationship between parents parents and children when they suddenly are not child and parent anymore, but they are. You're two grown-ups, you know, having. So I'm kind of curious. My daughter is here, and she's 7 now, and it's like, what kind of relationship will we
ask about that
when we are older?
Yeah, how do you?
Because she's a part of my. I mean, she sees a lot of art, of course, and
would you
see
ever
my work.
Include her in your work?
Probably. Now she's too small, so. But probably. I mean, yeah, if she wants.
What about your husband? Has he been involved?
Yes. Yes. In one video, together with my father. So no, but it's interesting. It's life and art goes together in a kind of interesting.
I just can't help, you know. I know I'm bad, but you know, there seems to me like there's more. There's more in there. There's something deeper going on.
Yeah. But it's, you know, I don't find that I think I leave to the viewer. Then when it's become interesting, they can just guess.
Have you found that people have a different relationship to those works now than in the past?
No, but now when you say it, of course, I haven't been talking about it so much, but I think, of course, there is something.
Yeah.
I mean, and I hope that a lot of, you know, all these people that collect these kind of works, and it's like, I mean, that we can talk about for hours about how suddenly you can get in trouble for something you did 40 years ago because of this Me Too. It's both, it's good, but it's also problematic. I mean, it has to be talked about. Yeah, and this is what I said. This is something ongoing where I, again, use these porcelain material figurines to work with, how I kind of separate and then make sculptures again out of something that was a sculpture. And then it's again a sculpture, but it's my sculpture then, and I do what I want with it.
Okay, now we come to Marthe.
And then the pigs come out.
Well, interest of time. So Marthe, so I think you grew up on a farm.
Yes, it's true. It's where I live also.
Where you still live? Yeah. So what made you become interested in art and film and video and all this?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Well, I think it was, I didn't start with filmmaking. I was starting with painting and
You went to art
installations.
school?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've been through the whole, but I think it's the power of storytelling that got me into that. So it's still, but I don't write the story, you know. I think of the story in the sense of images and also how to create powerful images and how I always use reality as an effect, as a filmatic effect. So I kind of blend fiction with reality, and then there's also this thread of mythology and old stories in a contemporary setting.
And when did you begin working with animals, or was that from the start?
Well, it's probably 10 years ago. It's, there've been animals there in and out, but it's not all my films are with animals either. But it's I think it's the idea of the animals is more like I'm interested in the mythological image of the animal, how we use the animal to explain things for ourselves, like in fairy tales and so it's how we use someone to tell the story we'd like to tell. So it's.
I love this picture actually.
Yeah, well,
directing a pig. Yeah.
So this is I try to make stories that are what I go for is to create unpredictable stories, and in order to manage that, I think the working method itself has to be unpredictable. So it's never that I have a script that I write from A to Z. It's always I have an idea, I have a tight situation, and then I want unpredictable things to happen. And of course, when you put a lot of actors within a pasture with a lot of pigs, and then you have a plan for the scene, then of course a lot of unpredictable things happen, unforeseen things. But I also had to work with actors that are very good at interact with them. Between themselves.
Improvisation.
Yes, so they are very good at improvisation. So in this case, I worked with actors that have been worked together at the theater for 10 years. So they knew exactly where they had each other, you know. And
let's see what comes here. Okay, so there's one of your earlier.
Yes, this is from 2007. Yes, it's a film called The Comanche Area. It's a road movie with the Comanche Indians, filmed in Oklahoma, and it's 30 minutes long. And it's the story itself is about the preparation of a sweat lodge, but on this, so it's kind of starting out like a dull documentary in a sense, and then it turns into a more new idea of a Comanche Area that used to be the old land of the Comanches in the old days. But this is kind of more like a reconstruction of a Comanche Area to come in the future. And they have these, I use the snake and some of the mythological animals, but also included like the chief of the Comanches. He's acting in the film as a chief of Comanche Area. So it's, and also, it's also, the working method itself blurs the fiction from the documentary, so you can't really tell what is what.
And what made you so interested in working with, Native American subject? There's indigenous cultures in Norway, I assume,
yes,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably a lot of coincidences that led me to that, but I've spent a lot of time in Texas, and a friend of mine, he introduced me for...
Did you have a residency or something?
No.
No.
I was working at the very bad equestrian center in Texas, actually. Yeah. So I was just out of curiosity, and I got friends there, and I started to work there. So, and he introduced me for the chief of the Comanches, and then I started out like I'll spend a lot of time there, got friends there, and then we are making this film together. So it's a collaboration like that. But it's also to comparing with the animals and how our stories and how we use someone's identity to explain for ourselves, So it's so it's a similarity there, I think.
I think there's a little clip.
Yeah.
See you. Small, relay.
Was that on film or on video?
It's well, it's in between. It's a high definition video. So I do all the filming myself.
Yeah.
So, but this is from 2007, so that was before the 4K equipment.
And this is, of course, the video that's included in our exhibition here.
Yes, right. So this is not stills from the film. These are, I also very often make photographic works together with the films that are images that are not in the film, but it's like after or before a scene. So just to add extra story to it. So it's.
So when you show when you showed that maybe the first time, do you like to show the photographs in addition to the video in an exhibition?
Sure.
Usually?
So the first time it was this film was made for the Momento Biennale in Moss in Norway, which is just the Nordic Biennale for contemporary art, and I think that was in 2009. Then it was shown together with the triptych of the 3 photos. At the bottom, and they are like almost like life-size horses. So they were standing against the wall. It was kind of, it's like in the film. It's they use the reflection as they manipulate the cars with reflections. I don't know if I'm gonna reveal too much for the story in the film because it's screened at 3 o'clock today.
Possibly
4 or 3.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's about. The Legend of Ig is a film about horse girls.
There we go.
A little group of horse girls they turn. It's idyllic in the Norwegian countryside and everything, and then it turns out they are more or less cynical suicide killers on horseback at night. They are dressed in black and they will do chicken race with the cars on the road. And their weapon, they use the horse as their weapon, and also horses can reflect the light from cars in their eyes. You know, like animals. When you are out driving at night, you can see the reflecting eyes of animals along the road. So they will use that as a weapon. So it's in that film. It's a lot of Old Norse mythology mixed into a contemporary everyday setting. In a stable, which is actually at my neighbor's place, so it's very close to home. And so it said like this is an old image from Iceland. It said that in Iceland they were so narrow, the steep were they were so narrow, so they had to. If you met someone, one of them had to jump because it was no space that you could cross. So it was the most fearless one would just jump into the void. So this is a research photo. This is me on one of my horses, checking out the reflection, how it works. So it's you have to use the blitz on your camera, and then you get a lot of. It's very effectful.
I think there's a little trailer too. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the start of the film.
What is Havamal? What does that mean?
I don't know if you the directly translation of it, but that's still how to live your life. You know, it's like the old from the Viking era.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like sayings. You know.
made the sound?
Yeah, that's a Swedish black metal musician. Maybe you know him. He's called Dan Ola Persson. He's part of a very old, one of the first black metal groups called The Ancient Rebirth. And he's made a lot of soundtrack to my films, but he's also very interested in the old mythological and old traditional stuff. So he made a kind of remake of this Icelandic song called Rhythm Rhythm, which is about it's more like a national anthem of Iceland actually, but it's about going riding out at night, and you have to get back in before the darkness. So he made a new take on that one. So it's a great soundtrack.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yes. So this is the intro to the film.
The sound is very good. I was thinking there should win an Oscar for sound editing, when they always have those, because especially the sequence with the car crash, the sound is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and we collaborate very tight, like from the beginning. So it's very good.
I don't know if that's looping, is it, or is it still going on? No, it's still going on. The whole film? I forgot.
15 minutes.
15?
Yeah.
Let's see what else we have. Oh yeah, we come to your...
This is my new project.
Film?
Yeah, it's a film
in progress.
In progress, to be finished in, let's say, June 2019.
Yeah.
So I'm in the finishing process now. It's going to be a 50 minutes long film. It's a group. It's about a group of people who explore animal behavior, and in order to learn about themselves, in a sense. You look at the animals as someone that always teach us things, and we use the animals as characters in our fairy tales and stories. So it's pushing the boundaries so far.
You can see how that, imitating animals.
This is a real wolf.
Da vil jeg at du skal ta med deg dyret, så skal du begynne å bevege deg. Og så vil jeg at du skal kjenne etter hvordan det dyret ditt møter bakker. Går du fort? Går du sakte? Går du tungt? Eller lett? Kjenn litt etter.
But that was from the other film.
It's a teaser. Yes, it's.
That's new.
This is made before. Well, it's before the film is finished, so it's
Yeah.
But it's still it's new soundtrack by the same musician.
Same,
yes, it's a totally different soundtrack.
I think that's it. What we have, right? On here. So both of your works seem a lot about human psychology.
Yeah.
Right.
And we use heavy metal as soundtracks, I just realized.
We like that.
A Demon's Desire, there is also like this Norwegian heavy metal band soundtrack.
Yeah. I did a project with a Norwegian heavy metal band.
Okay.
Thorns.
Yes.
Who also did, worked with artists, and they did a sound installation for me when I did the Site Santa Fe Biennial. It was really, really great.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you guys been in shows together before?
No.
No, never.
We didn't even know each other until I knocked on her door yesterday at the hotel.
Yeah, staying in the same hotel.
Yeah. So it was a great experience.
Yeah.
We laugh at the same things, so that's good.
Do you have any questions for each other?
No, not yet.
So both of us are just
yes.
from now on, like the young and hip artists. So that's good.
Upcoming.
Right. Well, does the audience have any questions for any of us? Anyone, please?
Yes. You're a very international curator. So in your overview, global overview, is there any other culture that you've worked with where the mythology, the history, on that level, literary sagas, mythology, works its way into art? I mean, this show in the Phillips covered 200 years. Is it the most present in Nordic artistic culture?
Well, it's relative. I think in terms of kind of Western art, probably, yes. I mean, there's of course a lot of that in German art. When you think about someone like Anselm Kiefer and so. But I'm also thinking, as it turns out, that the last show I did just prior to the Nordic show, the Phillips collection, which I didn't curate but I installed it, was an exhibition of Aboriginal Australian art. There's of course, a similar, and it was all work by the women artists who only began to make art in Aboriginal Australia in the last 10 years. And their works tend to be very experimental, but also still very influenced by the traditions of Aboriginal culture, very deeply involved. So very similar, I think, in a way, just using different expressions, obviously, and coming from a very different culture. So I think it's, there's a lot. I think increasingly, I think artists are becoming more involved in their backgrounds and their stories and myths and so forth. I think that's something that I think is becoming more so. But it's a very strong part of, I think, the Nordic culture. I mean, I'm not the Nordic artist, so you have to ask them, but I think it is.
So it's actually a great jumping off point. So then I would ask you both how you feel about that history in your work.
In what?
Just mythology and the literary.
Kind of Nordic mythology and history.
Is it a factor in your work? Is it?
No, but I think a lot of things around you. I mean, in your life and where you come from, and it's like your head is more of your studio. It's divided into different small rooms where you always have things, your history or everything, and then it kind of blends together, and it just comes out, and in a way, the works can have a lot of things from the past and mythology and history, but also not. But at the same time, it's there, I think, because we all are history in a way.
if you look at Norwegian popular culture, a lot of Norwegian films still deal with the Viking era because that's where when we were heroes. You know, we never talk about the 500 years we were ruled by Denmark. There are no films about that. Sure. So we always jump to the Second World War or the Viking era because that's where we have our heroes. So I think that's pretty much why the Norse mythology still is alive in a lot of companies when they choose their name. You know, there's a lot of Norse names used on all kind of products. You know, that's where we go when we're going to find things, not the 500 years ruled by Denmark.
But again, I mean, I talked to you about this Swedish show on television. It's been a couple of years now. That where they invite American people who, with a Swedish heritage for some sort way back to compete in this thing about the prize is that you meet your Swedish family that you never knew about because you were connected 500 years ago. And it's very emotional, and all these people live in America, but they had no clue, but they're so Swedish, and they just love this. I mean, it's so interesting because they make this family tree to these people, and they go back and they visit their, like Småland, this part of Sweden where their ancestors came from. It's kind of funny, but also it's so strong because people do have that kind of strong feeling about something that just because you are a bit Swedish too. It's just so, ooh. And that's, I think it's interesting.
Is art education a prominent part of public school, early childhood education in the Nordic countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important part. And I mean, in Sweden, for example, there is a lot of, I mean, if you talk about today, there's very many art schools per
Early childhood and elementary schools.
Yes. I remember it a lot. I mean, that's where I, in a way, got interested in art, was very early on in school. It's a big, and especially now with all these Montessori schools and others, there's a very, huge pot is for, and now they try to reduce it, so you can feel it, and and it's so bad. But also in Sweden, if you think about today, I mean, there is like I said, there's almost too many art schools today. I mean, higher education. Considering that a small country like Sweden I think we have like 5 or 6 higher education school for art, and all this, there was like at least 50 from each school taking their degrees every year. And what should all these people do in this small country? I mean, it's not so easy to, I mean, and I was lucky in 1999, I was part of this, I was, American collectors and galleries saw my work in Basel, and it was the kind of a hot thing with Scandinavia at the time, and you could get a galleries, you showed much more, and now I think it's much harder for young educated artists coming out of school and just to be that, I mean, we're not that kind of interesting anymore. Now you focus on another country, and it's, I sometimes think it's hard also to have all these educations and all these artists coming out, and what are you going to do? And who's going to take care of you?
A lot of support by the state for artists?
Yeah, but you have to apply for it, and then if you become part of that system, you get money, and you get this scholarships, working scholarships and traveling scholarships. I mean, I got a lot of that, and but it's also not for everybody. It's tough, and most artists coming out of school maybe doesn't end up being these artists who have that kind of fame and glory. They start working in other fields, and we have this kind of 1% thing in Sweden, though, which is quite big now. 1% of all buildings that are going to build, public building or private building, goes to art. There has to be an art thing going on in that building.
We have that here too.
Yeah, you do.
It's not always so great because the committees that are formed to decide what goes there. So if that's for a courthouse, they put judges on the committee, and they don't necessarily have.
No, but that doesn't happen in Sweden. We have these special groups of people who is in the art field who decide that. So it's a lot of public art now these days in Sweden are really good. I mean, it's almost like an outdoor gallery. I mean, you can go to a place like a hospital today. It's like a great art hall show because it's such great works. So that's the good part. That can also be a part of that.
Yes.
Just quick answer to that question about childhood education. Because we've spoken about this, that I, being from here but lived in Sweden, have my kids gone to school there, that it's not really fine art, it's crafts. Like in Sweden, it's like you have, carpentry and sewing, which, I mean, I think it should be fine art, but obviously something comes out of it as part of the tradition. But I actually was thinking about, I don't really know your work very well, I'm sorry to say, I know your work better, but in terms of violence, I have this sense of there's violence, that you're addressing some violence in your work, and you are as well, like you didn't really talk about like the piece where your father is holding a knife to your throat, and you're both these lovely women, and it almost sounds like there's sort of a casual approach towards the violence. So I guess I wanted to ask you first about how you approach violence in your work. And
yes, I've been. Yes, I've been working with that through all my films in a sense. The thriller genre is probably the most I'm referring most to. And then I use, to make the fiction even more threatening, I use elements from the documentary, to make it more real, a lot from documentary. Yeah, so a lot of people that have watched The Legend of Egg, they ask me, do this community exist in real life, So yeah, they could, to make this reference that this could be a remake or like a restaging or that is I like that. So it's definitely a lot of references to the thriller genre and violence, and also made a film called the Killer Moose, which is about this where I actually got a lot of shots also filmed very close to where I live. A lot of moose spotters. They will, there in Norway we have gates along the roads, and there are some crossings there where the wild animals can cross, and you're supposed to go slower there because you can hit a moose. And there are some people, of course, try to film this, because it's interesting. Could be interesting footage. So there, I got hold of a lot of footage of that.
So and people trying to hit the moose.
Yeah, and it did. But it's more like a snuff film, actually, with moose. So but then it's also I also work. I make special effects, so I fictionalize it.
So Anneè, how about that piece?
No, but I think that piece is actually not my father; it's my mother who holds the knife, and that it's called Thin Line because that is what it is. That's how I feel with the violence and stuff. I think there's such a thin line between that and that side. Sure. It's black and white. It's dark and it's light. It's sun. Bad, good. You have always two sides of something, and I think there's such a thin line between all these sides. Between white and black, there's gray. It's just like it's a very thin line between those two colors. So I think that in that piece, for example, my mother stands behind me, and she's shorter than I am, so you have to stand on these slippery, way back telephone catalogs that we don't have anymore. And she refused, in a way, to do that piece in the beginning, but I kind of convinced her that you have to do it. So she did. So you see in the video that how it's so sharp that she just hold it there, but she don't see my face because she's in my neck breathing, and I look into the camera. So in a way, there is this thin line of what she could do, but she wouldn't do. But I don't know because she could, and maybe she would if she could. So again, there is this like thin line between this and that.
Didn't one of the Greek philosophers kind of come up with the idea that we're really two people? We're an animal, and then we're what we have learned, what the society has taught us, and this constant discussion about how to deal with that.
That's the negotiation between the two sides,
right.
The wild animal side and the human side. Yeah.
And also the idea of us humans, how we are children and how we behave and who we are, and then we grow up and we become a certain kind of to deal with the society, to be able to live in this society for all these years, and then we go back to childhood again when we go old in a way. It's just like, that's I think that's interesting that the child and an older person is the same, that they do the same thing, thinks the same thing, and if you are to have dementia, you like go very back to your childhood. You don't want to go home. If you're in a home, you don't go home to talk about your flat, you talk about your childhood home, where you want to go home to. So I find that, I'm very interested in these kind of things with life itself, from here to there.
It was interesting, earlier in the first tour I gave this morning, one gentleman was telling me that when he heard the sounds of Ragnar's video where his mother is spitting on him, and he thought it was like a baby spitting. It's the sound that he heard. So, but it's interesting in a way. You know, what she's doing is kind of very, very kind of, you know, like a baby or a child, you know, spitting, you know, instead of talking or so. So there's also this going back to childhood thing. That.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm glued to the chair with those little pants.
Thank you.